All right, you guys, welcome to the show. It's Provoked. I'm Scott Horton from the Libertarian Institute. Oh, there's Mr. Daryl Cooper, Martyr Maid. I got my Homer Simpson glasses on. I realize that these aren't funny because they're Homer Simpson glasses. They just make me look especially old. I'm like
Wise.
a bookkeeper of some kind.
They make you look wise, Scott.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm sure that's what. That's how it comes out. Definitely what I was going for there. Hey, man, how are you?
I'm good. I'm a little frazzled. I hate any city over 20,000 people these days, and I just flew into LA, so I've been in airports and on airplanes all day. And my reward for not crashing into the ground from 30,000 feet is that I get to be in beautiful Los Angeles. So
I love LA, but the last time I was there, I thought, oh my God, it's like that movie Escape from LA, which was a knockoff
yeah,
of Escape from New York, which was
dude, it's like
already
when
pretty
you
bad.
fly in and it's different than it was when I even 20 years ago. Like you fly in and the city just stretches off to Tijuana now. And
Yeah.
it stretches like all the way up into Ventura County. There's just city nonstop up to San Bernardino. It's insane.
Yeah, and there's no gap between the Inland Empire either. It's just one
No,
big city out
no.
to Upland.
There used to be, but there's not anymore. You want to hear something crazy though? That's just completely unrelated to anything that we are going to talk about.
Yes.
When I was in Kauai, I worked for the government. There's a Navy missile range out there, so I was assigned out there for 6 months. And I was on a helicopter, and we flew over this piece of the island that was 175,000 acres, and it was owned by the guy who founded AOL and built Time Warner for like $150 billion or whatever they sold AOL for right before nobody cared about it anymore. And I was like, how big is that? And so I was curious. And so I'm flying into LA and I looked it up. How big is the San Fernando Valley? It's smaller than that. It's like 160,000 acres or something. It's just like crazy that one dude owns all that. But anyway, little trivia for you. By the way, everybody, I'm on
Oh,
my
good.
laptop. I'm not at home, obviously. I'm on my laptop with a laptop camera and microphone. So if my audio sucks, blame that. I
Yeah.
will
You
not
sound
take
okay.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Cool.
You sound okay. Hey, I was flying today too, because I was in Chicago because I won a big award. Look at me.
Ooh, hold it up to the camera.
It's the Integrity Media Excellence in Journalism Award for 2025. And I won that from Integrity Media. And then also, who was there and who won it was the great Matt Taibbi, and also the great Jimmy Dore, and the great Julian Assange, who was represented by his brother Gabriel Shipton, who's also a great guy, and Robert Shear, who it was really great to meet him. I met him one time actually in LA at an event at a church with a skateboard ramp in the back. But it was really cool meeting him, and I learned that he was actually the guy that broke the story about the Iran coup of '53. And how he broke the story was he looked up Kermit Roosevelt in the phone book and called him and said, "Hey, why don't you tell me a story, buddy?" Anyway, he was really great. He's like 89 years old or something like that, and didn't seem a day over 75, dude. He was all piss and vinegar and going on and having fun. And then there was this lady named Dorothy Leavelle, who had been the editor of this independent black newspaper in Chicago since 1969, which or 68 even, I think was. So that was she gave a good little talk about that. And then Ali Abu Nima from Electronic Intifada was supposed to have won. Well, he did win, but he wasn't there because he had a death in the family. But he was represented by this lady named Maureen Murphy, who she gave her talk about all the journalists killed in the world this year, and especially, of course, in Gaza, which is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds killed by the Israelis there. So it was really cool. And then, but I also got to hang out with Ray McGovern was there, and John Kiriakou was there, and Aaron Mate was the MC, the great and lovely Kim Iverson, and Ford Fisher, who is that journalist that does all the coverage of the riots and the protests and all those kinds of things and publishes through Taibbi's Racket News was there. So, and then I got to meet a bunch of really nice people and all that. And then it was Len Goodman and Patrick Sullivan who run and host the thing and who I'm very grateful for. And so that was really cool. So
Nice. I'm not laughing at you or your award ceremony. I'm
it's
laughing at the
the Homer
comment.
Simpson glasses, right?
Max CC limit. No, I am not high. I just got off an airplane, and I wish I was. Why am I dressed so sexy? If you mean why is the shirt open, it's because I'm in Southern California now and it's freaking hot. I am looking a little wild. And Kyle, I love you too. So let's go.
There you go. Kyle Smith is so high, he's got to look down to see the sky. Okay, more things to say. Charles Goyette, you know him? He used to be a radio show host in Phoenix, Arizona for a long time, and he got kicked off the radio for being good on Iraq War II. And hell, I thought the guy retired, but it turns out he's just been writing really great stuff for private investment newsletters that hardly anybody gets to read. But guess what? He wrote a book called The Empire of Lies. And guess what? I'm going to publish it. It'll be the 18th book published by the Libertarian Institute coming up here real soon. And you know what's really cool about it, man, not to spoil it or anything, is I can just tell, and believe me, I don't take it personally at all, that he has not been reading me this whole time. So even though he's talking about much of the same stuff as me, it's totally different examples and totally different kind of directions of coming at the same kind of subject and whatever. You know, I always complain that like I'm not that good of a writer, so Provoked is just like this chronology. But if I was a good writer, I would have had it all mixed up and told the story in an interesting way. Well, that's what he did. And in less than 300 pages. And it's just great. It's called Empire Lies, and that'll be coming out. I'm really excited about that. So I got to announce that. And then I'm back to work on the audiobook, and I'm doing the last of the editing on the Academy courses. So that's coming up. And then I wanted to ask you about your part one, because I know your people are very interested.
Yeah. And dude,
to know what's your status, sir.
Yeah, I've been grooving on that. Before I forget, we got Mnet who said, "What's up from Ethiopia?"
Cool.
I love Ethiopia. Whenever I would go through there in the airport, I would stop in for a few days. Finest women on the planet, anywhere except for Armenia, which is where my wife's people are from. But love Ethiopia. Anyway, so Enemy. So I've been grooving on this thing lately, dude. Finally, like I cleared my plate and was able to just sit down for the last several weeks and really bear down on it. And man, like the way I had envisioned the thing, after I started getting it mapped out, I realized this is like 10 hours if I do it like this. And I know some people out there wouldn't mind that, but I got to cut it down a little bit. So I'm squeezing it down and pushing some stuff off until the next episode, but it's going to be a good 6-7 hour episode, and it'll be done here in a few weeks, like a couple weeks even. Like, I'm going through just like a little spoiler. This episode, I mean, you know me, like I'm Vladimir Putin in this shit, where you ask me a question about the Ukraine war and I start talking about Prince Vladimir. So I'm not quite that bad, but it's about the Germans in World War II, and you can't talk about the Germans in World War II without starting with World War One, at the very least, right? And
Sure.
so, I wanted to convey to people in a very visceral way, and it's a difficult episode to write, and it'll be a difficult one to listen to. Just what the guys in that war went through, really just, I mean, the conditions that they endured for years, if they were in the war the entire time, managed to survive. I mean, just like when you think about the environment alone, one of the things that I told my wife, I was like, I think of the other day when I was writing, there was some rain in the forecast where I live. It's like, oh, it's nice, warm summer rain. I think I might put on my raincoat and go walk in it, some galoshes, and like enjoy the weather and the nice smell. Okay, cool. Like go in your backyard, dig a big hole and make it high enough you can't see over the top. And now go get all your clothes, all your food, all the stuff you need to live, and just stack it up in there. And now you just forget about your house. You live in here now. This is now your home, and you live here. And now it's going to rain. And this is where you live, and this is just it. This is like that's where things start. When you start getting into the complete lack of sleep because of the firing and the artillery, the almost daily, at least minor traumatic brain injuries that people were getting, like on the daily, just from the concussive blast of the artillery,
Sure.
the overwhelming stress, the grotesquerie of being in a place that smells like rotting corpses all the time, to the point where it soaks into your bread. The smell soaks into your clothes, and you just can't, a lot of soldiers who went through it said that of all the things that decades and decades later they carried with them, like as a memory about that war, it was the smell, and big battles like the Battle of Verdun and Battle of the Somme. People would talk about how when they were coming up from the reserve lines to reinforce the front, You could smell it miles and miles away, just rotting corpses as you were walking up into this inferno, you know? And like these are all the rats. You know, a single couple of rats, like a male and a female, can have 880 babies in 1 year if they're well fed. And all of the rats on the Western Front were really, really well fed, you know, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of human flesh lying around.
Plus the
And
Woodrow Wilson flu, right?
plus
Which
the
was
flu.
not the Spanish flu, it was the Kentucky flu that Woodrow Wilson exported to Europe and caused extra millions of deaths on top of the war.
Little reverse Columbian exchange there. And then like, you know, I mean, just the little things like the fact that you're ankle deep in mud pretty much like 10 months a year. Most of the time in your trench, you're like ankle to knee to thigh or waist or sometimes armpit deep in water for hours, sometimes days at a time. Just constantly bailing water just to keep it below your knees because you're up in Flanders in northern France or Belgium, and pretty much the entire place, the water table is like a foot or two below the surface. And so you start digging down and you're in a pool of water before you even know it. So it's a full-time job just to bail water out to keep it below your knees. Your
So
feet.
you're saying you're making great progress on the episode then.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, I'm here like 6 hours later. So that was Enemy episode 1, everybody.
Daryl pitched this show to me. You know what we'll do, Scott, is you go off and I'll keep you reined in. And I was like, all right, that sounds pretty good. No, all right. Hey, listen, we got to do some super chats. We got a bunch of them here. We're doing this live and we got a bunch of people watching. So here's where we start. The first one is, what can we do to help, particularly with Defend the Guard? Well, the answer to that is you go to defendtheguard.us, especially you veterans, but everybody else too. Go there. They definitely need money, and they definitely need volunteers, particularly veterans, to go and represent at the state congressional hearings. That can be really effective. And then the easiest thing of all for people to do is to phone bank when it's at issue and everybody's bum rushing the phones in Arizona to the House of Representatives that week, and everybody do it all at the same time. It can be really effective. We've seen it over and over again. So, I mean, there's nothing more important to the anti-war movement in America right now than the Defend the Guard thing. And it's defendtheguard.us and bringourtroopshome.us. And then other than that, I don't know, man, leave an Amazon review. Send it to your buddies, you know?
Yeah, it's such a great project, man. Like sometimes it can get really despairing when you think of like what can we do to fight this machine and like rein it in. It just seems impossible. But then like there are these levers you can pull that are real force multipliers. And like this is a way that if we manage to get this through, man, they're going to have to work a hell of a lot harder to sell wars to us. If governors all of a sudden and state legislatures or their asses are on the line, if the guard gets sent, I love the idea. I love the project.
Yep. And I'll tell you just real fast, Diego Rivera is the guy with his boots on the ground running the thing most of all. And he said to me explicitly, oh, he is so over trying to convince anyone. This is war. You're either for this or I'm going to destroy your career. That's it. Black and white. We're not playing games anymore, and I'm not trying to be nice. Because you could convince a guy, and they'll change their mind and vote against you anyway. Yeah. It's got to be they're convinced that this is their only choice, and they have no choice. And so they're playing hardball. They're doing a really great job. So that's great. And that's Cruzy asked that question. Thank you, Cruzy. And then, he asked another one. And you know what, man, I agree with this. And I think I might have mentioned this to you. I know times are busy and tough, but William Bupert, you should talk with William.
I know. I've been meaning
so great. You listen to his show?
No, but I followed him on Twitter for a while, and I really like his account there. You know what? I've listened to a couple episodes of his show actually, but not enough to get real familiar. But I really want to talk to that guy. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, he was great. He was Army officer, and I'm not sure exactly if he was still in the Army or he is like a contractor training Afghan soldiers in the war. But his specialty is debunking counterinsurgency doctrine. But he's also just a master military historian on all counts, and he's done one of the courses for the new Scott Horton Academy and everything. And I just know you get a real kick out of him, dude.
Yeah, so, definitely.
And then that was also cruisy. Thank you, dude. And then Philip Taylor says, Daryl, are you familiar with Zoomer Historian's channel? If so, do you have any thoughts or the accuracy of his portrayal of Germany in World War II? I think that says, yeah.
I am not familiar with that channel, but I will check it out.
All right. And then Cody Folsom, Jimmy Kimmel was the last American patriot who spoke truth to power. Truly. I'm not
Finally,
sure. He's
somebody
got
said
quotes
it.
around that. I'm not sure who he's quoting. That's a pretty funny one. Well, you want to address the Kimmel thing? I love the devil horns in your cowlicks you got going on there, by the way, right?
Yeah, it's probably good. Look, man, it's a tough thing, right? Because we can look at this from an abstract, principled position, like Ron Paul was doing in that video that was being passed around today, and saying we don't like it when the left does it, and we don't like it not just because they're doing it to people we might agree with that we like, but because it's wrong in principle, and that is 100% true. The question that you have to answer for yourself, if you're going to be against that, like if you're going to say that we should never do that, the question you have to answer for yourself is how can you establish any kind of deterrence from the
Well,
other
wait, though,
side if they don't ever think there's going to be blowback for, it's a thing like when
but who doing what though? Because I think was Ron, and I didn't see Ron's video actually, but was he addressing the FCC commissioners saying we're going to go after him for this, or was he addressing the
it was a
companies
short
that were
clip,
going to
I
drop?
didn't
The
hear him talk
affiliates?
about that. It was more just the clip I saw was just more general. It was like we don't like it when the left does it, and we shouldn't be doing it either, kind of thing, right? And it's
Just on the overall cancel culture thing.
yeah, and I can't argue with that. Like that's those are my principles too. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like you can only bring a knife to a gunfight so many times before you get tired of getting shot. But you bring a gun to a gunfight, now everybody gets shot. So maybe that's where we're at now. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, and this is just the tragedy of American politics my whole life long, is whatever horrible abuses the last guy does,
Yeah.
sometimes the new guy runs on those things and then they almost never turn it back. This is what Robert Higgs calls the ratchet effect in Crisis on Leviathan, where every time there's a crisis, which is always, the government gets more and more and more power. And then sometimes, each crisis abates, as the emperor would say. And then the ratchet goes click, click, click back. But the actual, geez, this is the third time the word has escaped my tongue. The part that goes on the ratchet and wraps around the nut. I know it. I'm just stupid.
Socket?
Yes, the socket, exactly. The socket stays in the exact same place, and the ratchet goes click, click, click back, but it's just an illusion. You lose more and more freedom. So, like, if the Democrats are abusing the IRS under Bill Clinton, then they'll do the same thing under George W. Bush. And if George W. Bush is illegally spying and torturing, then Barack Obama will also illegally spy and torture, and this, and oftentimes expand the thing. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So. Instead of the Republicans saying what we're going to do is privatize the airwaves, and we'll see how long ABC, CBS, and NBC last without a federal license in the first place and a federal granted monopoly control over these airwaves in the first place. Start with that. This is actually the only Ayn Rand I ever read.
Close the chat over here. It keeps making me laugh. Okay, go ahead.
That's right. The only Ayn Rand I ever read, because I never read any of their stupid novels or any of that, but the only thing I ever read by her was Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal. And she has a great essay in there about the absolute Bolshevism of the national government nationalizing the airwaves back under, I believe it was William Howard Taft. And all they had to do was just homestead in which radio stations controlled which frequencies in which towns and all that. They could have figured all of that out through local state legislation and through court cases and whatever. It would have been fine, just like homesteading any other property. And instead, they nationalized the airwaves in order to force all the big companies to serve the national government. And so that's, of course, the first problem in the line here, is that ABC exists as a creature of the federal government in the first place, always has. But anyway, I'm all for revenge against Jimmy Kimmel. I hate him, and I'm okay with market pressure coming to bear against people for things like that. And in fact, what I read, I think in the journal, what the people at the company said was that he refused to apologize. They said, you go out there and say that you were wrong about that, and that he offered what he was going to say, and that wasn't good enough. It wasn't like a full retraction. He was going to like try to half stand by what he said or something like that, I guess. And
I kind of wonder if they gave him like a poison pill ultimatum, like the Austrian list of demands to Serbia, right before the First World War.
yeah.
Just because like I have seen people and including people who I know are like kind of insiders, mid-level insiders in Hollywood say that show was losing insane amounts of money for the network for a long time, but they had a contract and they were happy for the excuse to cut him loose. And so maybe that's true. And now they get to come away looking like, oh, we're the victims of the federal government. And, the FCC might have done them a favor. I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. Like market pressures. I mean, I don't think anybody can complain about that. If I have a deli in a Jewish neighborhood and one of my employees, one of my like guys at the checkout counter walks in with a swastika tattoo on his arm showing, then he's going to get fired, because I'm trying to sell some sandwiches to some Jews, man. But like, and so I get all that, like, that's fine. It is a little bit of a, people want to make it like it's a new step that the federal government stepped in, though, but it's not. That's the problem. Is like this stuff. I mean, for sure, over the last several years has been going on, but it's been going on for a long time in different ways. It's just, we're kind of in this weird holding pattern. I feel like a lot of us where we're looking back on this thing that we don't want to give up on, and this thing that we hope we can kind of pull back to the present and restore, but then at the same time looking forward and just sort of wondering if like maybe things have just changed in this, like we're not going back to how things were and like this golden age that we like to think of, 1776. Like we have to deal with the world as it is now, and these are the tools and the way power is exercised and the way it'll be exercised against us if we don't exercise it ourselves. I mean, I feel like especially our generation, Gen X, like the Zoomers, they don't have as much trouble with that. The Zoomers, they've been born into this chaos. It's one of the things I think about a lot, actually, is how, shoot, you're like, people voted in the election last year who were not born when 9/11 happened. They were little kids when the financial crisis happened. They don't remember that. There were people who voted in the last election. They're 18 years old, who were 10 years old when Trump ran for office the first time. They're 10 years old. And so it's just been chaos that they've been thrust into, like from the very beginning. And this is just the world to them. And they don't have like, and they were also born into a world where a lot of these sort of sacred symbols, of the national community and just a lot of our historical things, where a lot of these things had already kind of been disenchanted and been cast aside. And they're thrown out into a world where these things are already kind of, looked at as silly and delegitimized. Whereas, those of us who have sort of straddled the birth of the internet, I was a grown up before I started really using the internet.
Hey, there are adults today that were born in 2007.
Word. Yeah. And that's the thing to think about.
Turning 18 this year.
Yeah. And so, I feel like our generation, like we have a little bit more trouble. Like we have to, I heard somebody say this the other day and it really kind of hit me hard, is like, before we can move forward, there's certain things that we almost have to allow ourselves to grieve the loss of.
Yeah.
And
you know what though? Here's the thing. I mean, I don't know like what all the ramifications of the death of Charlie Kirk are going to be. You know what I mean? There's going to be a lot of them. The fact that he was I'm willing to sit right here in front of everybody and argue with anybody guy, that's obviously highly symbolic, right? He wasn't shot just because of the views he represented, but how he represented them. And so there's going to be a chilling effect from that where people are going to be, less interested in trying to mimic that same behavior. On the other hand, they might have just made 1,000 more of them, because honestly, like things like this are terrible, but they're very rare in America, right? Like all the campuses Charlie Kirk has done the same event on before, that this never happened before, out of, hundreds and hundreds of appearances, I'm sure. So, and it's a very unique case. So I hope people won't let it, won't react too bad and let it change how we operate around here. What I mean? We've had assassinations before. Yeah. We're not getting rid of our First Amendment. We have to keep it. We have to.
Yeah, it's
What are we
unique.
going to do without it? Because then it's just going to be an absolute war of censorship each time the other guys are in power. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it's unique in terms of how extreme it was with somebody actually getting killed. But I mean, the problem is people have been watching, it maybe hasn't been in the news as much lately, but for years of just, anybody remotely conservative. I mean, remotely conservative shows up to a college campus to give a speech. Charles Murray, it's the sweetest old man, like Charles Murray, very traditional, kind of like just conservative guy goes, and it's a riot on campus. And like the woman he's with, who's opening for him, gets assaulted, and people have been watching this happen for a long time. And it's not assassination, but it's this sort of, people feel and have felt for some time with good reason that a lot of the leftist radicals, just like in the late 60s and early 70s, like you let them get to a point where they felt a sense of impunity. And when you get there, once you're at that point, it's really hard to reestablish deterrence without overreacting, because they don't think you're going to do anything. They just don't think there's any consequences to their actions. I mean, there's certain things like when you go back to the 2016 election. I don't know if you remember. I mean, for a while there, it was like every Trump rally, when the people were leaving, they were getting attacked by like mobs of people. Their cars were getting destroyed and they were getting chased around and beaten up. Like that kind of thing is not something that we just have every election cycle in America. That's a different kind of thing that came out. And, here's where I'm really torn on the state response to the Charlie Kirk thing is I feel like the idea that the government is going to now step in and do something about this is the only thing that is keeping some right-wing dude with the rifle from loading it up and going out.
Yeah.
Like he has to know that, I'm not going to do that because the state is going to do something, at least something, and if they felt like, no, the state's not going to do anything and the media is not going to mourn him, they're going to mock him and all this, then dude, you're getting the right-wing guy with a rifle out there somewhere. And I don't want to see that. And so, that's like where that's where I'm torn, I guess, is between those two things.
Well, I mean, look, I've been seeing people say, because I have been looking at Twitter a little bit, that, well, lies are not protected speech. Well, yeah, they are, unless it's fraud, right? Or what was this one? I wrote it down. The guy was saying, this is reckless endangerment. Jimmy Kimmel saying that it was a right-winger that shot Charlie Kirk. That's reckless endangerment because, right, nothing. In America, what's illegal is a direct incitement to violence. And that's it. We've been through this already. And in fact, the defining case was a Klansman who threatened a politician and said, we're going to get our revengeance against you. And the Supreme Court said he had the right to say that. What he didn't have the right to say was, let's get him. Right? That's the distinction, because this isn't England. This is America. So that's it. So all this hate speech stuff is barking up the wrong tree. And I'd like to give good credit to Matt Walsh and Orrin McIntyre, who, I watch both of their shows pretty regularly, and both of them just absolutely slammed Pam Bondi and said this should be the end of her career for saying, oh no, there's speech and then there's hate speech. No, there's not. And just, it takes one crisis, and it's not just that they abandon any principles. They just become Democrats and sound exactly like their enemies and invoke the exact same standards. But these two right-wing influencers that I've seen immediately came out and said, no, wrong lady. And I believe Orrin said, hey, if you can't do this job, go home. That's it. We're not putting up with this at all. And I think Tucker Carlson said the same thing. He went off on his show about this, that they're denying your very humanity when they're trying to deny your freedom of speech. Yeah. He killed it on this. So I think she was forced to kind of retract and back down on that. But we got to hold firm to that, dude, because remember, I mean, they were breaking the law and they got away with it for a time, but they lost at the polling booth finally over it. Anyway, but just remember the tyranny of the censorship on Twitter just a few years ago before Elon Musk bought it. It was just horrific, dude, the way they treated people. and the way they helped to rig the election of 2020 by what they do by shadow banning Charlie Kirk and all of his buddies, all of the new right-wing influencers, Mike Cernovich and Jack Posobiec and all of those popular MAGA guys, all got shadow banned down to oblivion in order to try to, and I think with great success, to rig that election against Trump last time. Anyway, I should shut up and read more of these things because we got super chats. This dude says, oh, do we think that Trump is capable or interested in actually ending the war in Ukraine as we stand right now? My short answer is I think he is interested, but not capable. As I've said before, the Russians are winning, but they're winning slowly, and they're still far from their goal. And the Ukrainians don't want to turn around and quit the field where they're still standing. And so it ain't quite a stalemate, but it's a slow motion war of attrition favoring Russia. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's already lasted way too long. It's far too dangerous, but I don't know what the hell anybody can do about it, quite frankly. It's terrible.
I mean, look, I think that we, whatever reservoir of trust we still had remaining with Russia in 2022 is just gone now, and they don't feel like we are capable of sincere and lasting agreements. And I mean, we reinforce that like every day when we're holding negotiations with the Iranians and, the Israelis are secretly plotting a sneak attack against them at the same time. Like when you do stuff like that, the rest of the world takes notice, and especially when you have the hubris to brag about it, like we did with that. And some European officials did about the Minsk Accords all being sort of one big gag to kind of string the
Right.
Russians along. Like the Russians didn't see it as a gag. The Russians saw this as a way to like
Surprisingly.
stop this war from coming to fruition. And like to hear officials that you've been negotiating with their people this whole time just sort of laugh at you and say, "Ha, you believe that?" And at this point, it's like Putin might believe Trump wants to do it, but he also knows that there's limits to the power the president can wield and that he's only going to be in there for a couple of years. And who knows what happens after that. And so, it's hard to make an agreement that you can really trust with the United States right now. And that's one of the things that, I wish that our leaders would take more seriously, right? Is that something like our national honor, like our word is our bond as a country. Like we have to do this thing that we said we were going to do, even though it's actually going to cost us now. And it's not going to be good for us, but we said we would do it. We committed to it. And so we're going to do it. You gotta maintain those things. Like those are the kind of things that, forget the next administration. Those are the things that are going to matter 10 administrations from now. 15, 20 administrations from now. Does America keep its word? Does America do what it says it's going to do? If they say they want us to sit down across a table from them, are they holding a knife behind their back and waiting for us to, turn around to go get lunch? I mean, these are the kind of, like, just as a human, like human beings, right? One of the things they say about psychopaths is that they tend to move around a lot, if not geographically, at least from one social circle to another, because they just inevitably, people kind of catch on to what these people are about, and they just burn bridges everywhere they go. And so they have to move on. But you can't move on in the global arena. America's here, and our word and our national honor and how we're perceived, that's going to stick with us, And I feel like the damage we've done just over the last 15, 20 years, or really, since the end of the Cold War for sure, when we were in this unprecedented position, right, with the world at our feet. I mean, we could have set up the American world order any way we wanted that could have lasted, 1,000 years. And instead, we just kind of stuck with the petty, just bullshit geopolitics. Yeah. And it's really unfortunate. And I think, at this point, the rest of the world's just not buying it anymore, and that's sad. I mean, you don't want the rest of the world not trusting the most powerful country in the world. It's a recipe for bad things. So,
all right, man, I got to cut a spot here for the show. So first of all, this show Provoked is brought to you by the book Provoked by me, published last year. It's about 477,000 words on how the Cold War with Russia, the new Cold War, with Russia is all America's fault and the causes of the war in Ukraine. Before that, I wrote Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, which looks like that might be relevant again because Donald Trump says he wants to go back to the Bagram Air Base and get this idiot argument. I already addressed this in the book, 8 years ago, that, oh, well, China makes nuclear weapons somewhere near Afghanistan, like in Western China. So we're going to station B-2 bombers at Bagram Air Base for when we have to do a sneak attack against China's nuclear weapons facilities? What? No, they're never going to station any major air power at Bagram. Enough to bomb Afghanistan. B-1s for bombing Afghanistan with, yeah, but B-2s and nukes for potentially holding over the head of the Russians or the Chinese stationed in Afghanistan? No, they're never going to do that. So what advantage does that give them to go back to Afghanistan? Nothing. These people are crazy. Sorry, I had to say that. And then this one is called Enough Already, and it's about all of the terror wars. And there's a review of it today and all weekend at antiwar.com by Michael Holmes, who interviewed me a couple times. He's a German guy who interviewed me a couple times. Dirty Wars and Endless Lies, Scott Horton's shattering history of America's war on terror. And that's it, running at antiwar.com this weekend. So I had to say that. And then I also have to talk about the Expat Money Summit. This is where, say you had some money and you were trying to save it from annihilation by Uncle Sam. What you could do is you could find other places in the world where you can get citizenship and or residency, buy property, and protect your assets. This is not some scam where like they teach you how to cheat on your taxes and go to prison or something at all. Nothing like that. This is all about staying exactly within the rules of the United States and the other countries in the world and how to do it exactly right so that you can protect your assets. And it's taught by this great guy. His name is Mikkel Thorup. I would say Mikkel or something. Mikkel Thorup. He's a really good dude, and he's expert at this. He's been doing this a long time, and the whole thing is free. It's expatmoneysummit.com. And Chris, is there like a /provoked at the end of that or something? Yeah, /provoked. expatmoneysummit.com/provoked is, I haven't been saying that the last few weeks. Go there. The whole thing is free. They'll have some upsells or whatever, I guess, during the conference. But it's from October 10th through 12th, and they'll teach you, and they're focusing on Latin America this time. They'll teach you how to protect your assets, buy up property in Latin America, and save your money and all of these things, and the right way. And it's not like just some only an upsell where, you know what I mean? Like they just string you along and make you buy things. Like, no, they actually will teach you the basics, absolutely what you need to know for free throughout the whole summit. And then the various upsells will just do a little better than that. So that's business. If you have any money, protect it by looking at that, and then drink my coffee if you like waking up in the morning, or if you just need to drive drunk home from the bar, you get some coffee in you. All right. Listen, this guy asked a question. It was, Fear the Old Blood. Fear the Old Blood asks, oh, that was the Ukraine question I just did. This guy, same chatter. Do you two think that the shit lib types are going to treat Jimmy Kimmel as their free speech martyr in the same way the right is treating Charlie? I mean, kind of maybe, but I don't know. He didn't get shot and he ain't got charisma. Not really. Jimmy Kimmel, he's so washed up and old. I think this will be the last one on the phone here. What do you consider to be the biggest distraction for right wingers of our time? I'll leave that one to you.
I mean, right now it's hard to think of anything else other than just the obsession. And I get it. I'm one of these people to a degree, and I have to fight it off in myself, the impulse a lot. But just the obsession with conspiracy theories. It's the most natural thing in the world. The government lies to us about everything. Like even when there's no reason to lie, they still lie, and so that, those are the conditions that are, just perfect soil for conspiracy theories to sprout up and grow in. And so I get it. And I'm one of those people. I have to remind myself of this, but man, like I've been just at war on Twitter the last couple days over this Israel killed Charlie Kirk thing. And it's just like, look, man, I'm of all people on the planet, the last person who puts anything past, like from a moral standpoint, anything past the government of Israel. I mean, we've watched for 2 years that there are no moral limits that they consider applicable to their own to their own behavior. I put nothing past them, but man, you've got to start with okay, we don't know anything, we don't know who did this, we don't know, so now what evidence do we actually have, and you've got to work out from there. You cannot start with a conclusion and work your way back, fitting every little square peg into a round hole and trying to cram it in there to make it work. And people are so stuck on it, man, like they really 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 want to believe it, and it's easy to believe. Like they kill a bunch of kids in Gaza, they kill a bunch of journalists, they would do, I mean, their deeper history, that like again, there's no real limits. It's not a matter of whether they would or wouldn't do it from that standpoint. But you got to be able to, present an argument to people and present information to people that they can't debunk in 5 seconds when they go look it up. It just makes us look stupid. And more than that, it distracts from real issues that are going on. Like the other day, I said that Charlie Kirk, Israel killed Charlie Kirk is why we can't have Israel has too much influence in U.S. foreign policy. It just gets subsumed into these sinkholes of conspiracy theories, and what it reminds me of is when I would go to the Middle East for work all the time when I was with the DoD. I would talk to a lot of the Arabs in the different places that I would be working, and man, like, and these are English speaking Arabs, so they're more urbane and like educated than like your average dude in the slum. And man, their heads, and I don't even say this as an insult or whatever. A lot of them are great people, but their heads are just so full of conspiracy theories that they cannot think straight about just regional politics or anything like that. Like they believe them all, and there's just they assume that the craziest conspiracy theory version of something is probably what's true, and then they start there, and it makes it so that that conspiracy theorizing and obsessing over that stuff is what they do instead of actual politics. Instead of like the type of organized politics that would actually get anything done at all. They're just like caught in these rabbit holes they can't claw themselves out of. And I see that happening like in corners of the right these days. I mean, you had like, I know you're like not paying as much attention to Twitter, but you had like Nick Fuentes over the last couple days, known Zionist shill, Nick Fuentes, who's been on saying, what's the evidence exactly for the Israel angle? Like, just what is going on? And you got tons of people on the right saying, oh, they got to him. He got the ball. He must have it's like, dude, I don't know. It drives me insane, man. Like we have to no matter which angle you're coming at this from, even if you are somebody who hates Israel, even if you're somebody who hates Jews and they're your enemy or whatever, it doesn't matter. Whatever approach you're coming from, you cannot abandon reason, and you cannot abandon the requirement to think and speak and act with a sense of justice. It's important. Like if you it doesn't matter where you're coming from. Like, reason and justice are not negotiable things that you can cast off when you feel like it. Like you have to always have your feet planted on those two things. And so look, if Israel killed Charlie Kirk, if that comes out, I will literally on a live stream of Provoked, get a live crow and I will eat it in front of you. So you'll have a full mea culpa. You get to watch me eat a live diseased bird that I'll catch on my own, on a power line nearby. But yeah, man, just that. Like we got to focus on real problems, and the conspiracy theorizing. Again, I understand it, and a lot of times it's more true than not. But you can't let it distract us from like hard political problems that we're actually trying to solve.
Yeah. I mean, my approach to this stuff is just be patient. I don't feel the need to be first on all these things. If Justin was here, that would be his job to write, everything we know so far as of Wednesday night or whatever. But for me, I don't really have that. I don't feel that pressure to pronounce what must be the final result conclusion thing now. So I know there are a lot of theories going around. A lot of people taking it upon themselves to investigate, which I think is great. I was, I was looking at Twitter a little bit. I was watching a little Candace Owens, and I was just thinking, man, if we had had YouTube and Twitter back in the days of the Oklahoma City bombing, they wouldn't have gotten away with that. There is no John Doe 2 crap for a day, dude. They would have just been nailed, dude. We know all these Nazis' names. We know which cases they testified for the prosecution and the rest, dude. Give me a break.
I mean, maybe, but
So, as a still Oklahoma bombing truther for the last 30 years straight, um, I think it is important that people investigate these things independently and don't wait around for the government to tell you what the truth is. But like you're saying too, that doesn't mean you have to just jump to conclusions. You can just compile a bunch of things to wonder about and wait as long as you can to make your conclusion. Try your best to debunk these facts that you're compiling. See if you can falsify them. You can't build a house out of straw anyway, dude. So if you're going to really make your case, you're going to have only the best pieces. So
yeah, and I see a question from CyberChud 2077. Why would you say that as the information is still coming out and it's so early? I'm not. We have to separate these things, right? To say that there's no like hard evidence that I've seen that I think anybody's seen that Israel carried out this assassination is not the same thing as saying the story the government is telling us is true, or that they're like on the ball and figuring this out in the right way or conveying the information. It's not the same thing, to say that, like when we say be careful and take your time, that just means it's what you said. Just don't jump to this conclusion. But you have to really ask yourself, like you have to think about the claim itself and how extraordinary it is. Israel, this foreign country, ordered an assassination of like an American political commentator and figure. Now, would they do that? Yes. There's no doubt in my mind Benjamin Netanyahu would sleep like a baby tonight if
yeah,
he
no,
did something. There's no doubt about it.
yep.
They've done way worse, and they've been doing it on a daily basis now for years. So it's not that, but you have to say, okay, that's step one, is that this foreign country ordered to hit on this American citizen in broad daylight with thousands of people around, cameras everywhere, and they've got apparently the president, the vice president, the FBI director, the DOJ head, just everybody in the American government covering for them as they've done this. So you have this vast, sprawling global conspiracy at this point that's like, and now, okay, maybe it's all true. But if you're going to go down that road, you've got to, you better have some good points to make, and not just some innuendo that, well, I don't want to name any names, but like, just, you can't just have innuendo and like holes in the official story. And, therefore maybe this other thing, this insane sprawling conspiracy theory is true. Maybe it is, but you got to have some solid building blocks to like put that together on, and people are just not waiting for that.
Yeah.
And I feel like it sucks so much. And like people have been coming at me so hard for saying this stuff on Twitter, but it's like, dude, we're almost certainly on the same side of most of these issues. This is, I mean, the reality of it is like, whatever you think about it, if you're right and they've got the president, the vice president, the FBI director, just everybody, then guess what? It's going to be like JFK. In 70 years from now, people are still going to be arguing about it. And so,
Yeah.
like, it sucks all the air out of the room when this stuff becomes the focus. And anyway, I don't want to dog on people, man. Like, because like I said, I get it. Like, I 100% get it. There's no reason to believe anything that these people say. And there's nothing morally that you could put past the Israeli government. I'm with you on that. I
Yeah,
get
boy,
it.
I know that.
But we just have to remember, like, to stay. We got to keep our eye on the ball and make sure we maintain some sense of credibility among people out there who like are not already on the train. You know what I mean?
Well, look, yeah, hold your horses shouldn't be that controversial of a statement. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean hold your horses on looking into things. Just hold your horses on concluding things till you can be more careful and be more right. I also wanted to mention real quick, dude, that speaking of Israeli murderousness, that I interviewed an American Palestinian doctor,
I
Palestinian
saw that.
American.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to listen yet, but
Yeah, Anas Ahmed is his name, and he spent a month over there in May operating on people, you know, getting bombed to death and shot to death over there. And I got a real good interview out of him the other day, which just posted. So if people want to take a look at that, it's, you know, under my Scott Horton Show handles. There are 3,000 people watching live right now on our various things, which is great. Everybody go over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@provoked. I think you need that at in there. Or if you type /anti-war radio, it's my old anti-war radio channel, so that'll work too. It'll forward you over there. And then, yeah, this is great. I'm having fun. I missed doing live calls on pirate radio. We're going to get to that someday here, but for now, well, let me run through these chats real quick. We have Reed Hoppe and Rothbard. Of course, that's true. Left and right, the prospects for liberty, anatomy of a state, war, peace in the state, and, you know, other great ones. The case against the Fed. What has government done to our money? And our anti-imperialist heritage. And okay. Did you see Trump wants to retake Bagram? Yeah, I already cussed about that. Non-interventionists should support tariffs. Well, I'm not exactly sure about that, but I know that we do have a very rigged and crooked, not exactly free trade system that basically says you can keep your tariffs on us and we'll drop our tariffs on you as long as you let us have military bases in your country and dictate your foreign policy, right? That's our deal with the Europeans, the Koreans, the Japanese, and whoever else. And so it definitely should not be that way. And so if the trade-off from bringing our troops home is we have to renegotiate, you know, some level of protection just, you know, with other countries, I'm listening anyway. And
yeah,
you know what? I know that there are really smart libertarian arguments where no matter what their tariffs are on us, we still shouldn't have tariffs anyway. But I'm not that good of an economist. I'd have to ask Mark Thornton to explain all that crap, so I'll pass. But I know that I don't support this rigged game that we have now, which is really a giant pretense to maintain military dominance throughout the planet.
yeah, and I mean, I'm like you. I'm not a good enough economist to pronounce on the effects of that necessarily, but I would say from the non-interventionist standpoint, and maybe this is what he was getting at, but you know what tariffs do, like forget the economics of it. What they do is they give you foreign policy tools short of force to use in your dealings with other countries. You know, you can go to another country and say, you know, we're going to stop allowing you to sell your main products into the American market, or we're going to incentivize Americans to buy, you know, by lowering tariffs and like opening it up for you. It's a lever you can pull that's something short of, you know, hey, we're going to invade your country or bomb you if you do something we don't like. And you were dead on though. I mean, it's, you know, it's this Cold War system that we established, which maybe made sense, you know, during the Cold War, this idea that we're in this global war against the, you know, another empire. And, all the countries whose loyalty we're competing for, we go to them and we say, look, here's the deal. Like, you get to develop at a breakneck pace because you're going to be able to just sell into our market and we're not going to sell into yours. And as you said, you know, but you're going to be on our side of the Cold War, you know, foreign policy wise, like we get to call the shots there. And maybe that made sense in the Cold War. But then by the time we got past the Cold War, you had all these countries, like forget about like the non-aligned countries that we were doing this with to kind of bring them into the fold. We got like Canada, European countries that we were doing this with that they're completely rebuilt from World War II. They have better public transportation, better infrastructure, better everything than we've got over here. And when Trump comes along and says, you know, maybe we need to rework this system that we put in place to fight the Cold War, they act like some sacred tenet of American democracy and the global system is being violated. And it's like, no, it's not. You know, these are just these are negotiations that have needed to take place for 35 years, and they haven't yet. And it's good that they are now. But yeah, I mean, tariffs are foreign policy tools in addition to just being economic, you know, incentive machines. So that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah. All right. So, Well, here, let's just run through some chats here. This guy says possible movement on Illinois weapons ban next week. Praying. Do you know about that? They're gonna. I guess
No,
it sounds like
I saw the chat about it. I don't know anything about that.
there's a chance it's going to get less worse. Is the implication I'm picking up on that they might be rolling something back? Is that what that sounds like?
Maybe so. I will have to. Maybe we'll talk about that next week because I am not. I'm not really aware of that
Yeah.
issue at all.
Here's another one. Kimmel taken down. Fine by me. I hate the bastard, but FCC pressure. Not a fan of that at all. I think that is absolutely the correct take. I used to like Jimmy Kimmel when he did the Man Show a long time ago. Oh, look. Reminder, Dave DeCamp is at the tail end of the fundraiser over at antiwar.com. Help him fight the good fight and donate now, says Adam Parker. You got that right. And I'm editorial director there. So I mean that when I say that. I was actually got to hang out with Dave last night. He went out to the award ceremony thing in Chicago. And we got to go hang out. Great dude. He's our news editor there. Read him every day. I'm concerned with the administration using this to crack down on anti-Israel sentiment. I mean, ain't that the way? And that was part of what Pam Bondi said. Was like, oh, we got to crack down on anti-Semitism. Or McIntyre was like, oh God, listen, lady, you know what I mean? And look, he is no hippie leftist pro-Palestine activist. And he's not a strict non-interventionist Ron Paulian either, but he's just saying, come on now, you're getting on my nerves with this stuff. You know what I mean? Charlie Kirk's assassination was not about anti-Semitism. And no, it doesn't mean that we need more bans on speech for Americans who want to criticize this foreign nation of Israel. And it's in the
And then
news
there's
now that
hate
this guy,
speech.
Mahmoud
And
Khalil,
there is
you're going to now
no
deport him to
place, especially now,
Syria,
especially
or
after what
where's she
happened to
talking?
Charlie in our society.
Or Al
Do
Jazeera,
you see
Algeria. You want to play the clip, Chris? Go ahead.
more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people, so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
Kook. So yeah, and this is the thing is, as we were talking about last week, can't we just defund all the liberal arts departments? There's a big controversy at Texas A&M this week, I believe it's brand new, where a student kind of secretly recorded the teacher preaching some trans ideology type stuff. And the student says, well, the president changed the law on this. I guess their interpretation of Title IX is what she's referring to, or I'm not exactly sure, but I haven't kept up with it that close. But so this became a big controversy between the president of the university and whoever else, all the chairmans and provosts and whatever. And I believe the headline that I saw was several professors were fired from Texas A&M for pushing this stuff after they'd already been told not to, and that kind of thing. Which, man, why even have these liberal arts departments at all? You want to read the classics? They're all on Kindle, dude. Like, we don't need the national government, especially, or even the state governments, to subsidize these giant colleges to teach a bunch of gay communism to everybody's son and daughter that they send off to get a higher education. You know what I mean? You're supposed to be reading Chaucer and whatever. And now,
I mean, and even beyond all that, like, these departments are just scams, dude. It's like if you're going to art school at like Cal State Northridge. It's like you're not gonna like get a show at the Met from that. They're completely taking your money and selling you a dream that is completely false. And so you think about it, like you're an English literature major or a gender studies major. Like what jobs are you competing for? Well, all 50 of you in your class are all competing for your professor's job when he retires. And so it's just this huge bottleneck, and just by default, 49 of you are going to be disappointed, they're just a scam. They scam people out of money, these kids who were told. I mean, it's really sad that we've created this culture around the university system that makes it so that people who do something else, people who I can't remember if I told this story on this show or not, but I used to dude, somebody I was dating at the time, I used to have to go to these universities, graduate school art shows, right, for these students, and it was absolute hell on earth. Like contemporary art is just so, or maybe I'm a Philistine, I don't know, but I hated it. And so I would be there, and there's a bunch of these art hoes and like homosexual men who have created things that they're calling art, and they're being shown and commented on, and I'm just sitting in the back chilling, like waiting for this whole thing to be over. And there was this other dude who I would always commiserate with. He was the husband of one of the girls in the art program, and this was here in LA, and this dude, he owned a landscaping company and employed like 60 people. He had people all over the city, doing work for businesses, homes. Like he had like 30 trucks. Like this is established. He was like 29 years old, right? Just like a legit dude. And I'll never forget because we were in a little gaggle one time, and there's a bunch of these art girls standing around, and then me and this guy and maybe one other dude. And they asked him at one point where he went to college, and he just said, "Oh yeah, no, I did a lot of landscaping when I was in high school and stuff. My dad did landscaping, and so as soon as I got out of high school, like I just jumped straight into that and started building my business." This is a dude who's like, again, a hyper successful dude. 60 people, he's like paying their salaries, and all of these art students who are like 34 years old in graduate school because they can't think of what else to do with themselves at the time. They all, they work at Starbucks despite the fact that they've got a bachelor's degree, and they all look at him like, oh, like they felt bad, like, oh, he didn't go to college. And the worst part about it is it bothered him. He should have been like,
Right.
I don't care about your opinion, but it did bother him, and because that's the culture that we've created, where like you're a lesser person if that's who you are, no matter what you've done, and it's really destructive. Like because I mean, like in terms, like it's socially destructive. Like you can't find a freaking electrician, to wire up your house for you to fix something within the next like 3 weeks because they're all booked out. But you've got a bunch of kids with graduate degrees who are working at Starbucks and living with 5 roommates in their 30s. It's just a terrible, perverse incentive we've created.
Yep. And then they blame free market capitalism for the whole riot. Hey, this is late stage capitalism. When I take a giant loan from the national government to go to college to get some worthless degree.
Keep talking.
Yeah, sounds like freedom's fault. All right. Hey, so this guy says, Marley Analytics. I haven't been calling out these names. I'm sorry, guys. I should be. Does Kirk's assassination in any way remind you of the transpose of MLK? Could this be the start of a counter-revolution? And I would point out that Hunter Durensis, who's our editor at the Libertarian Institute, he ran a piece at TAC, which I think it was not his title. They called it The Hero We Needed. Charlie Kirk was the hero we need or something. He makes a comparison there with MLK, obviously citing the best parts of MLK and his nonviolent approach and all of that. And then, so I don't know exactly what kind of counter-revolution, but are we getting a hell of a reaction out of this? Yes. I mean, I don't know where it's headed. I think,
well,
go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the I'm not exactly sure what the questioner is getting at, but I will say this, and this is something I worry about. If you go back to 68, right, you had two sort of main currents of the protest movement. You had the white college kids who were mostly anti-war protesters because they didn't want to go to Vietnam. And then you had the civil rights, black rights protesters, right? And they had gotten increasingly wild over the course of the decade, increasingly sort of, you could say, antisocial and just separated from like the main current of like politics in the country. They were kind of beginning to branch off. And you had in 1968, or actually, so in 66, that's when Stokely Carmichael coined the term Black Power, and you started to get the youth in the civil rights movement who started to get really riled up. You had some of this on the the anti-war movement on the campuses too, but there was still enough built-in faith in sort of the established channels of protest, that most of that energy was flowing into those things. And so in 1968, when Eugene McCarthy was running on an anti-war ticket, you had all these hippies and all these anti-war radicals on campus who, they cut their long hair off and they
Clean for
shaved off
Gene.
their beards, clean for Gene movement, so that they could go door to door with these middle-class normies and talk to them about this Senator Eugene McCarthy and why they should vote for him. And you also, at the same time, even as like a lot of the youth in the civil rights side was getting really dissatisfied with the nonviolent approach and all of the things that Martin Luther King would talk about, he still had enough weight in the movement, enough moral authority in the movement, that he was able to keep a lid on all that, on things just veering off totally into black power and black separatism. And in 1 year, you get RFK's murdered, and Eugene McCarthy gets just totally robbed at the Democrat primary. You think like 2020 was bad. I mean, 1968 was at least. I mean, you had a guy who Hubert Humphrey didn't even win a primary. I don't even think he was in any but 2 of the primaries. And he didn't win a single one. He had like 0.2% of the vote or something. And they just installed him, And this was at a time when these kids, this wasn't like, are we or are we not going to raise the age of Social Security qualification or something? This was like, when I get out of college, am I or am I not going to go die in the jungle? So this was serious shit to these kids. And then you just steal the election. I mean, outright. And when they protested in 1968 at the Chicago Convention, the cops come out and just beat the shit out of them, And like, so that happens. And then of course, Martin Luther King gets killed. And, in this sense, like I've seen people say like, the left says we want to, we have to bring down the temperature. It's like, you just killed the guy who wanted to bring down the temperature. And so now you get the next thing. And that's how people felt in 1968. And that's very cathartic and honestly, in a lot of ways, like a reasonable way to react to a situation like that. But as we saw back then, nothing good comes from it, man. Like when people start freelancing because they lose faith in the established channels of getting their grievances across and dealt with, when they start freelancing, man, people can chaos ensues very quickly, as it did back then. And by the time it was 19, everybody thinks of like the 60s, like when they think of the Weathermen or all of these other things as things that were like part of the 60s. All that stuff started in 1969. This was like the end of the 60s when you were already a couple of years removed from Haight-Ashbury and all this this was like the end of it, and all the dissatisfied people who were pissed off about that they had put their faith into these established channels of protest, only to get stomped on when they actually started to win the argument. They were righteously pissed off about it, but as you see in the 1970s, I mean, it just spun off into complete craziness, because if you're not going into those sort of established channels that everybody sort of, that a large number of people have a sort of hand in shaping it and sort of shaping the rules that govern it, then people splinter off into like a million different cults and movements and just little groups. And you get Jonestown, you get the Symbionese Liberation Army, you get the Black Liberation Army, all these crazy little groups that are just committing violence for no real reason. It's just sort of nihilistic violence. But that's where you can end up. And that is where that's something we have to worry about right now. I mean, people are on the edge in terms of their faith in the system right now is hanging by the last thinnest thread in the tapestry. I mean, it is like, and you gotta hope that the people who are making decisions are aware of that, and that their decisions are going to be shaped by that. Because if you let large numbers of people cut that last thread, then you lose control of events very quickly. I mean, really.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how anyone could have faith in this system whatsoever, I think, but the question has got to be what to do about it. And it sounds naive now, and this kind of goes towards our next question. But, in a sense, the way I used to argue with the libertarians is, look, the Constitution is about 95% of the way to pure anarcho-capitalism from where we are now and it's supposed to be the rule of law. It is the charter that created this national government, and so it's supposed to be bound by it, and not going back to it, but going forward to it and implementing the Constitution, repealing the 21st and the 20th even centuries as much as we can, and having something like a limited republic, and with more and more decentralization of power. That's the way to fix this, right? Is because we don't have levers of power over Washington. If we could form a broad consensus against centralization, then we can make some progress with that. But as far as like on any one law, the people of this country have no power compared to the moneyed interest. And this goes, and I'll be quiet in just one sec, but the E. Rutger asked, it sounds like Daryl's deterrence idea aims at the idea of accepting the changes of the society. This comment is an hour old or whatever. We're behind the ball here, but when you were talking about that, and he asks, does this conflict with Scott and Justin Raimondo's ideas on reclaiming the right? It seems like there's already this push for a new right. And so my kind of take on that is that, yeah, I mean, we're stuck going forward in time the best any of us can perceive. So there's no going back to anything, right? It's the future right now. We're having this conversation halfway through 2025, by God. So reclaiming the right is, bringing up the legacy of people like Garrett Garrett and H.L. Mencken and Albert J. Nock and even John T. Flynn and some of the other people who were, made up the kind of opposition to Roosevelt and World War II back then, and at the very first days after World War II, and invoking that legacy of call it paleoconservatism or paleolibertarianism as a sound basis for a future non-interventionist foreign policy, a Ron Paulian foreign policy that's based on the quite strict recommendations of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and others of that generation, that you're going to destroy your republic if you go create a world empire. So don't, which, they explain that quite clearly. So we can do that. I mean, as best as we can, and try to, I think the right already agrees, as I love to quote Doug McGregor. It's the greatest thing anybody ever said. Time wins more arguments than reason. In other words, it don't matter you spouting off your mouth, boy, me. Not that he was talking to me, but that's how I take it. It's like, you sit here and complain. But guess what? By the time ISIS sacks Fallujah in 2014, everyone's going to agree with you, whether they ever heard you say that or not. They're like, geez, I guess this was all for nothing after all. And so the right more and more is with us. We don't have the power in the White House, obviously, but I think the narrative more and more belongs to Tucker Carlson and the likes of this show, in setting the tone for what conservative American foreign policy should be going forward. But what do you think about all that stuff?
Yeah, and I would add to it that decentralization, it has the added benefit of it's something you can sell to people on the other side. You can tell like a liberal New Yorker, dude, do you really want a dude in Alabama, a Baptist in Alabama, having a say in whether or not your girlfriend can get an abortion? Do you really want that? You don't, right? Well, yeah. So let's just separate these things out, decentralize, go. You can sell that to them. They might not hold to it once they're in power again, but you can at least sell the idea to them. And then also, like, it's talk about bringing down the temperature, like concrete ways you can do it. Decentralization is like the biggest way you can do it. If all of a sudden, like, it doesn't matter quite as much who gets elected president, because it's not going to completely change your life. I think we mentioned an episode or two ago, you think about how Ukraine was. It was just this disaster of a country because you really had two countries that were stuck together that didn't want to be together. And this side, the East would elect a pro-Russian guy, and the West would, elect somebody who hated Russians, and they go back and forth. And neither side felt represented whenever they were out of power, like at all. So there was no loyal opposition, and you got what we have now. And of course, they had a little help with all that, but that's what happens when you have an immensely powerful federal government. Is it really matters like who gets elected president? It really matters like who he appoints to the Supreme Court. Because I mean, You know, if you got the wrong guy in there and a Supreme Court justice kicks the bucket, your life might change, like in ways that matter. And if that was not the case, you know, if the Supreme Court was ruling on trade disputes, you know, between states and like shit like that, but social issues, cultural issues, a lot of these things were handled at the lowest level that they could reasonably be handled at, which I would argue is like the township probably in most of these things. Um, you know, people wouldn't have to invest so much energy into questions that people didn't used to do that. You know, you didn't have like your average dude who was turning a wrench all day, just pissed off at night because Herbert Hoover appointed such and such as a federal judge. They didn't give a shit. Had nothing to do with their lives for the most part, or if it did, it was in like minuscule ways that that they were never going to notice. And that's just not the case anymore because we have this machine, this federal government now that, if you go back to 1933 when Roosevelt was first coming into office, before the New Deal, before the Second World War and the Cold War, um, the federal government, if, in terms of revenues, in terms of personnel who work for it, in terms of just the activity and the aspects of society and the economy and everything else that it had, um, that it had a hand in, it was 5% the size of the federal government now in every way. And so what that means is that like 95% of the government grew up in the context of the Depression and global war. And that's what the government grew to deal with, to be proactive in the economy during a depression, because that's when all these agencies and these departments were all created. And once you get them rolling and get them moving and have somebody's job depending on them finding something to do, I mean, we all know that story. Like, it's just going to keep on going. And so we've got this giant thing that's built to fight an economic depression in a stupid way, but that's what it, thought it was doing, and to fight global war against the fascists or the communists. And that's what the government is built to do. And even things that we don't think of as being as having anything to do with that. When Eisenhower was sending troops down to Alabama to point guns at American citizens to integrate those colleges down there, he wasn't some bleeding heart like civil rights guy who just like was unable to sleep at night because this black woman wasn't able to get, like, maybe he believed that stuff, but it wasn't like something he was super like dialed in on. He just knew that the Soviet Union is sending their agents all over Africa right now to these non-aligned countries and saying, look at the United States, look at Jim Crow, look what they're doing to black people. Are you really going to follow them, or are you going to follow us? Like, come with us. Propaganda writes itself. And that's what Eisenhower was thinking of. And so even things like that have like a warfare state sort of tinge to them, and that's what the whole government almost really is. Mm-hmm. And the way that you deal with that is not to just like break it down or you have to devolve it down to lower levels. Subsidiarity is the only way you're ever going to do that.
Yeah, there's a great George Carlin bit about that, how we just declare war on everything. We got a war on poverty, got a war on education, got a war on this and a war on that. And it's our only concept for dealing with anything. We don't really do anything about it. We just declare war on it and send a bunch of DEA agents to kick in people's doors or whatever.
There's a joke in 30 Rock where Alec Baldwin says something like, he's like, oh, it's a war on drugs, the war on the poor. And then Tina Fey's like, I think you mean the war on poverty. And he's like, yeah, let's go with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Same difference. And he's being redundant with the war on drugs anyway. All right. This guy says, tell Daryl I spent countless hours fighting with people over his Churchill was the chief villain of World War II comment. I'm holding the line, brother. So glad to know.
I mean, I've talked a lot about that. I don't know if there's anything else everybody wants to hear me say about it.
I got a tangent there. I forgot to mention that I got a chance to meet, I'm going to say his name wrong, I have no idea how to say it right, Alexander Mercois, the guy from the Duran that does that great podcast. It talks all about Russia issues all the time. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised that he knew me. And he had been at that conference in Georgia where I'd been invited to give that short statement. And he said that I had made a great impression with my little talk that I'd given in Tbilisi there over Zoom. I was supposed to go there, but I decided not to. So that was cool. I'm going to send him a book, but he's a really great dude. And I forgot why that was relevant.
We're something about Churchill being
Oh,
a
because he
person.
said there's a book called Churchill by some commie. And I forgot the commie's name, but he says this is a very popular revisionist book about Churchill in England that everybody kind of reads, and then they pretend that they didn't because the guy that wrote it is such a Stalinist or whatever it was. I forgot. And I said, well, I just read AJP Taylor, and he's like, well, there, he knows what that means. Same difference. But so I don't know if you've read that book or not. I could recommend his email
Not the
to you.
commie one. I probably should though. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
I asked him what it was called, and I think he said it was just called Churchill. But I'm going to email him anyway because I need his mailing address. So I will try to hunt that down for you because I know you need it.
Cool.
Senator Brundlefly says, I like liberty. Huh?
That was not a fart. I rubbed against the wall.
All right, well, I didn't hear you. I like libertarianism. It's a game we can play only in an ordered society with shared premises. If culturally balkanized, I don't know how to play that game. Well, that's the whole point. You've got to teach libertarianism to as many people as possible and practice it as much as you can. Freedom is the parent of order. And if you just try to impose it, it ain't going to work anyway. So, Degenerate Society says they didn't dig up the nuns in Spain, but they had a lot to do with the Spaniards were digging up their nuns. Scott, you see the new KOTH. Knights of the Hoth? I don't know. KOTH. I don't know what that stands for. I was trying to guess a Star Wars name. The nuns in Spain? I don't know what we're talking about. You're the historian.
Yeah, Spanish Civil War stuff. I don't see the question, so I don't know the context. But he's talking about they would exhume the graves of priests and nuns and defile their corpses and do all these terrible things. There's pictures that you can find online, really awful stuff.
Yeah. All right. Derek Wheeler asks, speaking of conspiracies, Scott, have you done any digging on William Van?
Oh, yeah, King of the Hill. Well, of course.
Huh?
King of the Hill.
Oh, I missed it.
KOTH.
Oh, of course. Did I see the new King? I watched a couple of them, and then it was all kind of woke, and it just, man, they missed it. Like, this was all clearly produced before the election of last year, and it just seems so out of date. They're like, oh, it's Hank Hill dealing with woke times, but it just feels, I don't know.
They got boys that been whacking off in my tool shed.
Yeah, they could have made it more universal, It was too it's like watching a new Star Wars movie. It was like, wait a minute, is this long ago in a galaxy far, far away, or this movie was filmed in 2019? I get it. Anyway, Derek says, hey, what about William Van Wagenen says that the Arab Springs beginnings in Tunisia were not as organic as they appeared. Have I done any digging? Yes, I did. I interviewed him about it. I did 2 interviews with William Van Wagenen recently. Do I have the book right here to show you? No, but you can see I do have it. This is the book. It's the 17th book I've published. Admittedly, 5 of them were mine. But this is Creative Chaos, published by the Libertarian Institute by the absolutely great and even heroic William Van Wagenen. He paid the price in time in Al-Qaeda captivity over there, spent a lot of time in Iraq and in Syria, and really knows his stuff. And it's funny because I've been interviewing him supposedly about this book, but we just keep talking about the background. So we did like a whole show. We're just talking about Iraq War II the whole damn time. And then we did another one where we end up just talking about Tunisia and Egypt. That's the second one, Derek. It's there. We talk all about Tunisia and Egypt and this and that. And I was actually thinking about this, I guess on my flight. I was kind of spacing out and thinking about like how much I need to really reevaluate my take on the Arab Spring from back then, and even In Enough Already, where he really makes it seem like they were just as color-coded revolution as anything that happened in Georgia or Ukraine in the Bush years, and that from the beginning, and that it wasn't just that America exploited the ones that were in their favor and crushed the ones that were not, but that they really were behind it all. So, I'm really not sure, man. I think because part of his thing was it kind of depended on WikiLeaks releasing those State Department cables at an opportune time, but that's getting the cause and effect backwards, right? Like everything happens for a reason. Well, you mean effects had causes? I mean, because in this case, what happened was WikiLeaks released this stuff and there was a bunch of State Department cables in there detailing the corruption of the dictator of Tunisia and his wife's family especially. But then, as he pointed out, but who trumpeted all that up on the radio for the last couple of months before the riots broke out? And I don't know this for a fact, but I guess his implication was these are all USAID backed groups in Tunisia that ended up picking up the thing, picking up the protest movement. See, at least seeds of the same thing in Egypt at that time. Clearly, they absolutely just hijacked the Arab Spring in Libya and Syria in a way that was the polar opposite of how they treated it in Yemen or in Bahrain, Kuwait, or Saudi, where they just absolutely crushed all opposition ruthlessly. So,
Yeah, I was actually in Bahrain when that was going down.
are you
And
kidding me?
yeah, no,
Really?
I didn't see much, but I was in a taxi cab going from my hotel back to the American base, and I was a civilian, and on my way there, like we went through a zone where there were people banging on the windows of the taxi at me, and there was some tear gas coming through the vents in the car and stuff, and not it wasn't anything crazy. Like the real action was several blocks away, but yeah, it was wild, dude. And it was funny too because the countries we don't like, boy, you heard all about everything that their governments did to put down those protests. You didn't hear anything about what the Saudis and the Bahrainis were doing over there. And they were going hard, man. They went ham on those people. And it never even made the news here.
Right. All right. Well, look, man, we should wrap. We're at like an hour and a half here. I saw one guy said he didn't think the Israelis killed Charlie Kirk because they would have blamed it on a Palestinian. Which
Or on me.
makes sense. Yeah, or on Daryl. All right. So listen, I think this has been a lot of fun. We covered a lot of ground in no particular order. Let me check my notes real quick. Oh, Trump says October 7th was genocide. So, okay, but then that means that definitely what Israel's doing is genocide. Iran signed a new deal with the IAEA to restart sanctions, although the European powers are still threatening to do the snapback sanctions, which could destroy that. But there's going to be a new inspections regime. You can't say there's been an unbroken chain, though, since the war. So I don't really suspect that they've broken out toward a nuke, but I would not completely discount it. And then man, there's a bunch of random stuff on here. But, oh, you know what? Let me just say this one thing real quick. Maybe I'll skip it. Yeah, I'll just skip it. Oh, you know what? I'll say this instead real quick. They forced down the interest rates. The so-called independent Federal Reserve, bowing to pressure from the president, cut interest rates by 1/4 of a point, trying to just juice the bubble like he's George W. Bush, just sowing the seeds of future catastrophe. And, of course, we need just free market interest rates instead of having the thing rigged. But we got inflation above their so-called 2% target, and they're cutting it anyway. And so buy whatever commodities you can now. Buy gold and I'm not selling it. I'm just telling you, all your prices are going to keep going up already again more. And so I guess we'll leave that at that unless you got something else for us, bud.
Yeah, because he's asked it a couple of times. Matt, HM73, you said earlier this week, I said there was a podcast coming out that I'm super stoked about.
Oh.
I cannot tell you what it is. It's not my podcast. When it gets announced or comes out, it gets rescheduled, then you'll know what it is probably without me having to tell you, but it's not mine, so I can't announce it to you. But it's going to be good when it comes.
There you go. All right, cool. Well, thank you everybody for watching. It's been fun, and thank you, Daryl. And get some.
Yeah, sorry for the setting and my beautiful clothing and the laptop quality sound and video, and the fact that my forehead is just gleaming with sweat this entire time because it's freaking hot.
Yeah. Now you can turn the ceiling fan on. Thank you, everybody, for participating. It's been a lot of fun. See you next week.
See you next time.